I'm in a project where I'm changing out the Fox suspension that came on this Transition Spur with Ohlins. And this is the second video in this project. I'll link the first video below, but in the first video, I only rode the Ohlins fork. So I put it on for 3 rides and then put the Fox back on to really give me a comparison. I'm not gonna rehash everything that I mentioned in that video, but to sum it up, this fork is more supportive. It allows the bike to be ridden more aggressively without the front fork diving into its travel too easily. Now it's time to put on the TTX rear shock. And so I rode this bike with the Fox suspension for about 3 hours today. I'm going to put on the fork and the shock and report back what this feels like, because I have not ridden this shock at all. Now it is a shock with a piggyback reservoir, and the Transition Spur is not designed to run a piggyback reservoir, but I think it's gonna fit. I hope it fits. If it doesn't, this whole video is over. So if I'm posting this, it probably fits. I'll take a picture of the before and after, you know, with the Fox and with the Ohlins to show you what it looks like. But yeah, let's go ahead and change out the suspension. There's your before picture and there's your after picture. So it looks good. Plenty of clearance with the water bottle, so no issue there. You do have to use a 3mm Allen wrench to adjust your low speed compression and also your rebound. So that's rebound, that's low speed. I think low speed had 11 clicks and rebound was about 14. I ran about my body weight for sag. I'll pick this video back up after I get some ride time. So it's been a few weeks that I've been riding the Ohlins TTX shock in combination with the Ohlins fork, and I've gotten in quite a few rides. I'm going to break up this review of the shock in 2 different videos. The first one, which is this one, I'm going to talk about how the shock and the fork feels on my local trails. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the fork because I made some more adjustments to the fork, but I'm going to focus mainly on the shock for this video. I'm going to follow it up with another review when I get this shock and fork up into the mountains, which I'm going to do in a few weeks. And then when I get back home, I'm going to swap out the suspension back to the Fox so I can give a really good comparison between the Ohlins and the Fox. Now, I will say that the ultimate goal, in my opinion, for suspension is to give your bike what they refer to as a hover bike feeling. So you feel like the bike is just hovering above the trail, absorbing bumps without getting bucked up, without feeling too squishy. And I'll tell you, this Ohlins suspension gives that feeling like no other suspension that I've used. I said it before, it's a supportive feel, but I don't want to go too far into the ride quality just yet because I'm going to talk about some of the adjustments that you can make on this shock. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this is your adjustment for low speed compression and this is your adjustment for rebound, and it uses a 3mm Allen wrench. I have this little tool that I got with a Fox X2 shock, which has a 3mm on one side and a 6 on the other, because the X2 also uses Allen wrenches to adjust the suspension. And fortunately, this was in my tool bag, which really made it convenient to adjust because it is a 3 right there. But I ended up running low speed pretty much all the way open, so all the way counterclockwise, because this shock is so supportive that for my body weight, I really liked how it just opened up quickly with the low speed compression being fully open. With it turned even like 3 or 4 clicks clockwise, I felt like the shock was just a bit too harsh in terms of small bumps. And so I ended up just backing it all the way out. Rebound, I think, has about 11 or 12 clicks. I ran it 4 clicks from fully open, so all the way counterclockwise, and then 4 clicks. And for my body weight, the pressure that I ran in the shock and the type of trails that I ride, that rebound setting was good. I like a fast rebound because we have a ton of roots, and I like the shock to reset quickly for the next bump. And so 4 clicks from fully open was just right for me. On the other side of the shock, you have what Ohlins calls their high-speed compression adjustment, which is interesting to me because normally a lockout lever I would refer to as low-speed compression. It does work really well. So you see it's a P right there. So when that's straight up, that's the firmest high-speed compression. And now again, the reason I refer to this as low speed because normally when you're adjusting for pedal bob, that's a low speed adjustment. but it does firm up the entire shock when you put it in the P. The number 2 is a little bit less firm than P, but it's still a decent pedaling platform, which is where I ran it most of the time for like cross-country type riding. And then you would put it on number 1 if you wanted to have the most supple, so for downhills. And so again, that's your high speed that you can adjust while riding, whereas the rebound and the low speed 3mm adjustment on the other side of the shock is more of a set it and forget it, or set it for your type of riding and terrain. But this is something that you would adjust while you're riding. Really what I would do if I were riding up in the mountains, I would put it on P for climbing and then just put it on 1 for descending, and you're pretty much good to go. While I was testing the shock, I made some more adjustments to the fork to really match the shock. And I ended up opening up the low speed compression damping setting all the way open, so all the way counterclockwise. And that gave the bike, to me, the best feel. I've used the word supportive a lot when describing the fork and the shock, and that is the beauty of the Ohlins. It doesn't use as heavy of a negative air spring, which gives the fork and the shock a more supportive feel. And that's really good for people who are maybe heavier riders too, because if you're a heavier rider or you ride super aggressively and you just feel like you can't get the support out of your suspension, no matter how many volume spacers you use, no matter what you do, you just feel like the suspension is just a little bit too soft in the mid-stroke and you need more support, that's where the Ohlins really helps out. And I'll mention that I did not run any volume reducers in the fork or the shock. I like a very linear suspension. I don't like a suspension that ramps up harshly because I don't do a lot of jumping. If you do jumping, then yeah, you're gonna want to add volume reducers. Now, when I go up to the mountains to ride, I'm going to put some volume reducers in the rear shock so that I do have a bit more support in the ramp up. So the shock is gonna ramp up more because I'm gonna be hitting bigger hits on this bike. I wanna talk about why you would want a shock with a reservoir like the Ohlins TTX or a Fox X2 or a Fox DPX2, and that is because you want more performance and oftentimes you have more tunability. Now, what happens is with the reservoir shock, the duties of compression and rebound are separated, so you don't have the same piston doing both, and that allows for better performance. Also, you've got more oil volume, and that helps the performance on a long and rough descent. So the rougher the descent and the longer it is, the more the oil has a chance to heat up because the suspension is working so hard. And when the oil heats up, it becomes less viscous, and that reduces the performance of the shock. So again, with a reservoir, you've got more volume and it reduces that. So that's why you really don't see reservoir shocks on cross-country bikes or bikes like this one usually that are down country with 120 mil travel, because you don't do as rough descents that you would on like an enduro bike, so the shock's not working as hard. That being said, it really does help the performance. So let me wrap it up by saying that the nice thing about this shock is the simplicity. So you only have a few adjustments. You set your rebound and low speed compression, and then you use the high speed compression knob when you're riding, and that's pretty much it. Whereas maybe compared to like a Fox X2, you've got high speed rebound, high speed compression, low speed rebound, low speed compression, and then you've got the lever to firm it up when you're climbing, which is great if you want to take the time to do all that setup. And I like the X2, but this one is a simpler shock that still performs really, really well. So as you can tell, I really like this shock and I really like this fork. Just when I thought the Transition Spur couldn't get any better, I think the Ohlins suspension upped the game just a hair. Like I mentioned with the fork, I still like the Fox suspension, and when I do my second video, I'm going to put the Fox suspension back on the bike and just give a final comparison. But the Ohlins does give the bike that more supportive feel. So I'm gonna follow up this video with the one after riding in the mountains, and I'll talk about how it does up there, how the fork does, how the shock does. So stay tuned to the channel if you want to find out more about how these ride in the mountains. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.